Cosa Nostra is arguably the oldest and most well-known mafia group in the world. In this video, we will look more closely at how well-organized, broad, clever, brutal, and rich this organization actually is.
On track, now we going way up. W's as easy as a layup. Working late, stay up, counting all the way up. Counting blessings, yeah, you know we pray up.
Along with the Camorra and the 'Ndrangheta, Cosa Nostra, which translates to our cause in Italian, is one of the three main mafia groups in Italy. The Cosa Nostra is an international criminal organization that has connections to other organized crime organizations, and its roots are in Sicily from the first half of the 19th century. It is regarded as the most well-known branch of the Italian mafia, and its members call themselves Uomini d'Onore, or Men of Honor, in Italian. Numerous family clans run independently, but a commission made up of the leaders of the most powerful families coordinates activities worldwide. Cosa Nostra, which also operates in America, was considered the most significant criminal organization in Europe towards the end of the 20th century. The Cosa Nostra can be joined through election or call. A candidate nearly always assigns to the family of his place of birth. Before joining, the possible new member's family and ancestry are thoroughly investigated. Admission is traditionally prohibited if family are or have been pimps, prosecutors, or police officers. Also, the candidate must successfully complete an examination in advance to become a member. This usually involves a serious crime, like murder or an armed robbery. The families typically don't pay anyone for the murders, which are frequently committed by young, low-ranking family members. These are the benefits that the Mafia offers its members in exchange for their protection and membership, as well as a means of elevating their status and reputation. The Cosa Nostra rarely hires outsiders or contract killers and essentially executes all of its killings on its own. Additionally, it typically chooses only pragmatic techniques. Murder is typically the last resort when all other options have failed. Italian lawyer and participant in the war against the Cosa Nostra, Giovanni Falcone, once said, "Men of honor aren't crazy or demons. It is untrue to say that they would murder their parents in exchange for a gram of cocaine. We have to admit that they are just like us." A man of honor is entitled to financial support from his family if he gets detained while carrying out criminal activity for them. In this situation, his blood relatives can also rely on the support of the other men of honor and the mobster boss. When it comes to individual member activity, this is different. Men of honor who operate illegal businesses alone are not required to split the profits, but they are also left to fend for themselves in the event of an arrest. This changed when the Corleone family came to power in the early 1980s, and since then, every family has been compelled to contribute a portion of all their income to the mob. This might sound crazy, but the Cosa Nostra actually fought against crime. Relations with common crime are tumultuous. On the one hand, the Cosa Nostra frequently sought for the most talented individuals from among its members. On the other hand, the group spent a considerable amount of time combating undesirable crime. Pimps, robbers, and sex offenders were all vigorously pursued, even to the point of murder. For instance, in the late 1970s, the boss Stefano Bontid ordered the eradication of thieves in the region he ruled. On the contrary, the Corleones ordered the abandonment of this tactic for many years following the Second Mafia War. Allegedly, this was done in an effort to keep law enforcement, prosecutors, and courts preoccupied with regular crime so that they would not have the time or resources to effectively take on the organization. The American Cosa Nostra and the Sicilian Cosa Nostra both participate in several illicit operations. Protection gangs have traditionally been the Mafia's main focus and source of income in Sicily. The Dominion-wide collection of protection money, which resembles a tax in many ways, supports the Mafia's state-like assertion that it is an international organization that does not recognize the Italian state as the highest authority. The Cosa Nostra relies heavily on this cash source even though it is less lucrative than drug dealing. Between 1920 and 1932, when alcohol was prohibited, the American Cosa Nostra expanded significantly, but it always had deep roots in both legal and illicit gambling. The Americans first entered the drug trade after World War II with heroin, which the Sicilians essentially took over in 1957. Smuggling different items, such as cigarettes or coffee, was another constant source of income, particularly in the first half of the 20th century. The Cosa Nostra conducted kidnappings of largely affluent people for many years. At the end of the 1960s, the Mafia itself eventually forbade this in Sicily. It was only subsequently legal on the Italian mainland. Senior Cosa Nostra member from Sicily, Tommaso Buscetta, listed a number of causes for this. The Cosa Nostra had determined that kidnappings of people should cease in Sicily for both practical and humanitarian grounds. When kidnappings occur in places like Sicily, where the Mafia has historically been centered, the overall atmosphere of hostility toward the kidnappers is created, which is unhelpful. Additionally, kidnappings cause police to pay more attention to organized crime. The Cosa Nostra does not engage in prostitution in Italy, where it is categorically prohibited by the Cosa Nostra itself. While the U.S. Mafia views drug dealing to its members as a matter of principle but views illicit prostitution as a significant source of income, the contrary is true in Sicily. The Cosa Nostra has mostly distributed its heroin in America and Europe since the 1960s. However, sales have subsequently dramatically decreased, and cocaine has taken the place of heroin since the early 1980s, when heroin trafficking reached its apex. The Cosa Nostra controls a portion of the European cocaine market, but the 'Ndrangheta dominates with 80% of the cocaine traffic in Europe. Cosa Nostra, the Neapolitan Camorra, the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta, and other international gangs frequently collaborate on international drug trafficking projects because it is frequently very difficult for a single group to manage the entire organizational complex of drug harvesting, logistics, distribution, and financing. The Cosa Nostra continued to process opium that was delivered from Turkey and the Near East itself from the late 1970s until the mid-1980s. But after the last drug lab was busted by law enforcement in 1985, there appears to have been a push to make heroin directly in the Middle Eastern nations where it is produced there. Also, the Cosa Nostra has collaborated with the Colombian gangs since the 1980s and specialized particularly in the trafficking of heroin. The Cosa Nostra was and is very much present in many legal economic areas as well, but they frequently employ corruption and other illicit acts to make these legitimate firms lucrative. Examples include those related to healthcare, trash management, and construction, where the Cosa Nostra frequently obtains contracts and building permits through corruption. In general, businesses are popular where the contracts have a high margin and can be obtained by bribing politicians. In the construction and trash disposal industries, this is specifically the case. The Mafia can maintain a monopoly in the restaurant and catering sectors by frequently extorting and threatening rivals out of business. The Mafia also generates a lot of money from agriculture and the export of Italian food. This is because over many years, the Mafia engaged in criminal activity to seize vast tracts of land. Not to mention the Cosa Nostra's involvement in the world's illicit armaments trade. However, because many families believe that the arms trade draws excessive police attention, this only generates a modest amount of overall revenue. Now let's talk shortly about how much money the Cosa Nostra actually earns. It is estimated by the state anti-mafia that the total annual revenue of the Cosa Nostra in Italy is about $100 billion. Comparatively, this is twice the turnover of the giant car company Fiat, which owns a total of 14 car brands, including Opel, Alfa Romeo, Jeep, or even Maserati and Dodge. These $100 billion correspond to about 7% of the total Italian GNP. Within the Mafia of Palermo, the first significant mafia conflict started in 1962. An unplanned heroin deal involving the La Barberis and the powerful, extremely traditional Grecos and Crociva Giardini served as the external trigger. Since Brooklyn received less heroin than the Italians had shipped in, boss Calcedonio di Pisa came to be suspected. Although the gathering of mafia bosses exonerated him of suspicion, he was still shot and killed on December 26, 1962, in Palermo. The La Barbera brothers were now held accountable for this murder as a result of their displeasure with the verdict. Most of Palermo's families banded together to fight the Barbera family, who controlled the city's core under the leadership of the Grecos. As a result, many troops from the Barbera family, as well as other soldiers from the rival families, lost their lives. In Palermo, many car bombs exploded, although no one took credit for these acts. As no one was certain who was behind the attacks, confusion ruled the Palermo Cosa Nostra. 7 policemen were killed in the 1963 Chocolate massacre by a vehicle bomb. This was meant for Salvatore Greco, but it blew up when the police officers tried to look inside the car. As a result, the Italian government received harsh public criticism for its inaction. The state now reacted as it always did when it received criticism in the media and from the general population. Many mafiosi were apprehended, while many more escaped to other countries. The bomb's intended victim, Salvatore Greco, fled to Venezuela. Not only did the battle end, but practically all of the mafia's activity in Palermo did as well. According to Antonino Calderoni, Palermo did not even collect protection money in the years that followed. The state's commitment also weakened as public opinion cooled and topics like left-wing terrorism came to the forefront. The crooked system that had previously prevailed did so once more. Due to Cavataio's alleged involvement in the murder that sparked this war, Salvatore Greco and Stefano Bontid, the heads of Palermo's largest and most powerful mafia family, made the decision to exact revenge on Cavataio. Additionally, Cavataio is alleged to have been behind a number of car bombings. Other significant bosses gave their support to the plan to assassinate Cavataio. Cavataio was finally killed on December 10, 1969. The disagreement was resolved when Cavataio passed away. Stefano Bontid was killed in Palermo on the evening of April 23, 1981, sparking the start of the Second Great Conflict. The largest and most powerful mafia family in Sicily, led by Bontid, had many partners, including the Inzerillos, DiMaggios, and Gambinos. Pino Greco, one of the murderers, used an AK-47 in his murder, and the same firearm was used in other notorious killings. It acted, in a sense, as the new prevailing alliance's symbolic signature. According to Giovanni Falcone, a brutal battle that likely claimed the lives of over 1,000 individuals resulted in the victory of the Corleonesi coalition against the old Palermo families led by the Bontid family. It was harsh and incredibly aggressive. Over 100 official victims were counted annually. In addition, over 500 abductees also vanished without a trace. They were murdered, and their bodies were either hidden, dissolved in acid, or thrown into large ravines deep within the country. A mafia murder took place in Palermo on average every 3 days in the years 1982 and 1983. Palermo ended up serving as the focal point for a conflict between two factions. By mafia standards, the Corleonesi were ruthless beyond belief, launching a veritable extermination campaign. Salvatore Inzerillo, the head of the Inzerillo family and Stefano Bontid's closest friend and ally, was the second prominent casualty of the war. On May 11, 1981, Inzerillo was preparing to get into his automobile when he was shot. Once more, it was determined that the murder weapon was the same AK-47. The members of the losing families were ruthlessly slain with surprising ease because the opposing group was now leaderless and had lost its bearings. As their ally Antonino Giuffre admitted, the Corleonesi were well prepared for their extermination campaign and had done thorough study to determine who was close to Bontid district by district before moving through with their methodical removal. The Corleonesi also continuously recruited new young members who were unknown to their rivals and kept the identities of their men of honor a secret. Thus, the killers could utilize the surprise effect repeatedly. The Italian state was forced to accede to public pressure as a result of the continued slaughter. General Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, a national hero for successfully leading the war against the terrorist Red Brigades, was sent to Palermo in the middle of 1982. After barely 4 months, he and his wife as well as a bodyguard were all shot to death there. Policemen and prosecutors were killed as the fight raged on inexorably. Even Rocco Chinichi, Sicily's chief prosecutor, was killed by a car bomb. The Corleonesi placed the corpses of their victims in front of police stations and barracks in order to highlight the state's weakness. The end of the war began as Carmelo Coletti was shot and killed in July of 1983, and Leonardo Infranco was killed in November. Both were among the Bontid Inzerillo faction's final allies. The attendance at Coletti's funeral was 10,000 individuals, or around 50% of the city's population. Those honorable individuals who betrayed their masters lived and, as payment for their treachery, promptly assumed control of their families, rising to positions of authority within the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. The Corellian alliance was able to complete a triumph without suffering any significant losses of its own because to defection and the active assistance of important men from the loser families. Of course, the Cosa Nostra is still active today in various illegal activities. They still extort protection money and still deal with drugs. Especially cocaine and heroin are a big source of income for the Cosa Nostra. However, the Mafia is now holding back on large-scale violent actions and wars because they prefer to stay undercover and focus more on business. If you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up.